And we are back. And if you're joining us now, we're just jumping into our second conversation. And we are going to be speaking about the Spotlight Initiative in Belize. And we are going to be learning all about the policies and structures that Spotlight Initiative is going to do, which involve responding to violence against women and girls. And here to tell us all about this new initiative is Cynthia Williams, who is the Executive Director of the National Women's Commission. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation as well for us to talk about this new initiative that is being led by government with funding from the European Union and coordinated by the UN system.
All right, and thank you so much for joining us. So let's just jump right into it, and we can discuss what the Spotlight Initiative is all about and how did it come about.
Right. Well, as you know, the issue of violence against women is something that is a global issue, and especially in times of emergencies or in times of pandemic, sometimes these things even get worse. But prior to COVID, one of the things that came about was really a partnership between the European Union and the UN, where they came together, and the European Union is now funding this 3-year project that addresses violence against women around the world. And the way that the project has been developed, it provided the opportunity for state and non-state actors to come together and really look at what are creative, innovative strategies that could be implemented to move forward to advance this issue. And so different parts of the world were kind of partnered, or the areas were separated, and the Caribbean region selected one of the areas of gender-based violence. And so our project focus will be family violence. So for us, it is important because we know that that's simply how the issue of family violence really affects all sectors of society. There's not one area that you say it's not in any way affected by family violence. And so for us, it was very important to be able to select very specific activities, but not only activities at the national level that are innovative and creative, but those that add to what has already been implemented. One of the things that government has attempted to do for many years, over the years, is really implement programs that build.
Okay, it seems that we have lost that call. Is it just that we lost the video, or we lost it completely? Okay, so we are going to try to get her back on the line. If you are just joining us, we are talking with Cynthia Williams of the National Women's Commission. She is letting us know the details about the Spotlight Initiative, which is to be launched this week, and this is a program that is funded by the EU, being dispersed through the United Nations system, and it's going to work with local counterparts, with government agencies and organizations that will be able to execute programs, make legislative changes that will hopefully have a greater impact on reducing the level of violence we see in families.
Yep, and, and looks like we have Cynthia back with us. Are you there? Can you hear us, Cynthia?
Yes, I actually was not aware that I was off.
Oh.
So that means you kept on answering us.
I did. I know usually, you just allow guests to talk about what is the word need to talk about. So I just went up.
All right. So then why don't you update us on what you were saying to your computer?
All right. Well, like I said, I'm not sure exactly what all you heard, but the Spotlight Initiative is a global initiative, 3-year project that is bringing together governments around the world. It is being funded by the European Union, and it is coordinated by the various UN entities, such as UNFPA, UNICEF, UNDP here in Belize particularly. And so it is a government-led project, but one of the key important aspects of it is that it allowed, provided the platform for state and non-state actors to come together to look at what the project would look like in their own countries.
Yeah.
So different countries around the world who are participating, they were separated into various regions, and each of these regions selected a particular focus. The project looks at the issue of violence against women and girls. And so we know that there are multiple forms of violence that women and girls experience. And so each of these regions then selected a particular focus. For the Caribbean, we selected family violence.
Yeah.
So for us, that particular issue really the project will support creative and innovative strategies. But more importantly, all these activities and strategies that are going to be implemented through the project also build on projects and initiatives of government that have been initiated over the past few years. And so it's not just a recent initiative in some way that will come and do everything from scratch, everything new. It's really building on what government has done over the years, but it also brings together a very diverse, a wide scope of stakeholders, like I said, both state and non-state. And this project, I think one of the key issues is that it tries to do so through 6 different pillars. And I know that this morning we're going to talk a little bit about pillar number 1 that looks at policy and legislative frameworks. And one of the pillars itself also speaks about direct work that needs to be done with the civil society organizations or community-based organizations. And so again, that is another difference in terms of this particular project, because it attempts to then provide one of the key areas, one of the key sectors that works with government very closely, especially in the area of the work that we do with gender and gender equality, which is civil society.
Clearly, to be able to have this type of focus, it means that you have some data, some numbers to work with. And I want to start there, because when you say family violence, that means what we usually call domestic violence or gender-based violence between spouses, but then there's also abuse that takes place with children. What else is encompassed in family violence? And what are the numbers or the data that you use to be able to paint the picture as to where we are?
Right, Marlene. As you said, the family violence really, it's multiple forms. The term family violence really is looking at violence that families experience within the context of their homes, within their families. For Belize, I think Belize has really been very progressive in a lot of ways, in terms that our own Domestic Violence Act does not only include violence between partners. It also includes, for example, on parents, on children. So in that way, our legislation has kind of preempted some of it, because in other countries, domestic violence specifically terms it as between partners or intimate partner violence, basically. And so we are in a big step ahead. And so what this project looks at is really strengthening or looking at what legislation is needed to be enacted to be able to then provide that measure for families within the aspect of family violence. So you have sexual violence, you have physical violence. You also have a lot of, in terms of even within families, you can even include aspects of cyberbullying. You know, so it's really very, very wide, but a lot of it focuses on the physical, the emotional, even financial aspect of violence. And that in turn actually leads into other areas of society in the community as well. When it comes to data, we always do struggle, and we continue to struggle. We normally, the reported cases usually are of domestic violence. And so that's one of the areas that the project will look like in terms of establishing a baseline, particularly focusing on family violence. And that is one of the earlier activities of the project, because then it provides the foundation for us to be able to say, this is the data and this is what it's telling us. How then are we going to be able to move forward, not only with the specific strategies and activities included in the project, but also other future ones that need to come after.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my question, whether or not this program was going to be another source of data, given the difficulties that already existed. And I'm also, you know, you mentioned earlier a lot of the this program is going to be geared towards developing and strengthening some of the existing programs that already exist. So I'm wondering if we can, just for the benefit of our viewers, talk to us a little bit about some of what those programs are and how this initiative is going to assist in their development.
Okay, well, like I mentioned, there are 6 different pillars with the policy and legislative framework being one of them. The second one is what they have termed as institutional strengthening. And this particularly looks at alignment of different sector plans or national plans within national policy and other frameworks. For example, some of the work that the National Women's Commission has started is engaging, for example, sustainable development units. We're working very closely with the National Committee for Families and Children in looking what are the different gender nuances that need to be included within those national plans. When it comes to the national sustainable the growth and sustainable development strategy, we know that is a direct intervention that looks at how to localize or contextualize the SDGs in Belize. Yeah. And so again, looking at engagement with that particular policy and look how did we did not include components of gender and issues of violence within that national policy. So it's really looking at how do we support institutions coordinate the implementation of all these national actions and be able to not only do it at the national level, but also be able to mirror those at the subnational level. And so it's looking at how much these plans will actually cost. Because sometimes we don't do that, and it's important to be able to realistically and honestly look at what has been done and be able to fill in those gaps and say this is how it actually will cost.
Let me ask, I know in previous conversations with you that we're looking at for 2 years over 2,000 reported cases of domestic violence incidents in the country. And I say reported because we know it happens beyond those who actually pick up the phone and call the police. There's also some data, I know, that looks at how many children have been exposed to physical abuse or child abuse. There's also perceptions about what is allowed and not allowed in relationships. My question just has to be, in starting off a program like that, how do you address what is really one of the root causes, and that is, or perceptions towards what is allowable violence and what is when violence crosses the line? Because it really starts insidiously. It's I spanked my child, and that's okay, but then the other person believes the same thing, but they're actually abusing, or they're going completely beyond what would be allowed, or the same thing with thinking, it's okay for my boyfriend to manhandle me, but someday it becomes a life-threatening situation. So my question is, how do you get to the core perceptions and how people view what violence is in the first place?
Well, Marlene, and that is what makes this particular work very difficult, because it's a very complex issue, and we must approach it at multiple levels, and we must approach it with multiple perspectives. And so I think one of the synergies in terms of what the project is trying to do is something that government has started doing in terms of the work that has been ongoing over many years. And so when we look at the establishment of the National Gender and Gender-Based Violence Committee, it speaks to a multi-sectoral response, because you must include Ministry of National Security, you must include Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, Human Development. It must include various partners, because at the end of the day, government cannot do it all on its own. And so the project in a way also mimics some of this by utilizing various pillars to implement the various strategies and activities. And so, for example, we've mentioned the first one, which is the legislation framework. also have the other pillar that looks at prevention. And so that has concrete activities that looks at public awareness, engagement of community, really looking to address changing those attitudes and those norms that you talk about. So that has to do in terms of prevention, while at the same time, we're also working in terms of how do we also strengthen and provide quality services for persons who are already experiencing, because at the end of the day, people need to be able to be aware of what their rights are and what is it that under the law they are protected from, and be able to access those services. So we also have to be able to strengthen that, and along with the issue of data and evidence, because if we need to be able to strengthen these programs and look at where the gaps are, we need to be able to have those concrete evidence and data to guide that process. And so one of the things that really, and I speak from the area of the work that we've been trying to do through the Ministry of Human Development and its 3 different departments, is really strengthen that data gathering. And so you look at the issue of care, that is an online case management system. And so that allows case workers to follow the cases from the beginning to end. And the project also looks at strengthening that particular system. Be able to also strengthen data gathering mechanisms through other ministries such as police and health as well, because we haven't established prevalence. We have reported cases on an annual basis, but even those reported cases, we know that those are not the true numbers. And to really conduct a survey or a research of that magnitude, we do need funding for that, and often is where we're challenged. And so definitely looking at the baseline study that will be implemented through the project is really a good help. And that's why it's important to to really underscore the importance of this multi-sectoral approach, and where we're bringing all the different key stakeholders, not only from state but also from non-state.
And that leads into my next question, which was going to be, in terms of the actual responses to the violence, I'm wondering if there are specific areas that the program is targeting in terms of the response time, in terms of support that perhaps victims of family and domestic violence are going to receive after perhaps reporting the case, whether it's to the police or to one of the regular or the other agencies, because after that there are several things which a victim may need in terms of support facilities and systems. So I'm wondering if there are targeted areas that this initiative looks at in terms of after a report is made.
Yes, it does, and that's why I keep mentioning the different pillars, because a lot of these activities fall under these particular pillars. And so when you look at the institution strengthening as well, it's working with the national institutions in looking at how do they also provide that response to shelters. You know that we have 3 shelters in Belize. However, they themselves are challenged by the different realities funding as well. One of the things through Spotlight that we've been able to do over the last few months of this pandemic is be able to support additional temporary safe spaces, because we know, research shows that especially during quarantines and states of emergencies and similar strategies that governments have to implement to protect the further spread or to not allow the further spread of COVID, often victims are in very close and all the time with their perpetrators. And so as a country, we've been able to then get funding to support those temporary shelters and temporary safe spaces, actually, not shelters, temporary safe spaces in each of the areas of Belize, in each of the districts. Additionally, one of the things that we've done is also strengthen the hotline. We already had a hotline many years ago, and unfortunately is not used as much as we would like to. However, one of the challenges and the gaps within that particular intervention was that it only provided that free access to make a call to persons with a BTL number. And so now through the project, we were able to access another number through SMART, allowing both SMART customers and BTL customers to have free access to make a call. With an additional component of the ability for them to make send text through a SMART number as well as WhatsApp messages. So that's one of the areas that we were able to secure some of the funding, in addition to the safe spaces as well. And when we look at the services, we are talking about the development of what are the essential services that these persons require, not only during the process that they're being accompanied and supported by the institutions, but also after. So the essential care package for these victims, as well as protocols that have been developed through the Women's Department for these shelters, and be able to really cohesively combine the various strategies that at the end of the day would benefit victims.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, this is a problem that its tentacles reach out to just about all aspects of society. It affects the family, it affects from the adults in the family to the children in the family. It requires the community support. It requires the support of even the service providers. And so that was really going to be my question in terms of whether or not the Spotlight Initiative also allows for some training for those who do offer the services. We know time and time, we've heard stories many times of where even your first responders may not have the level of sensitivity or may not understand the consequences of the acts of violence within families.
Definitely, and I think one of the things that this strategy also does is that it implements community programs that have already been in place, but look at how do we then utilize persons within the communities. And so what this program also does is be able to look at strengthening even the protocols that are in place, particularly the sexual violence protocols, and looking at what are some of the systems that need to be strengthened. Yeah. The National Women's Commission currently is developing and going to be implementing what we call the gender-based violence complaint mechanism. Mm-hmm. And so this allows for persons who are not receiving specific services by the different service providers and then now make a report via a form and also electronically. And this form would then be coming to the National Women's Commission, and for us to be able to coordinate and look at where the gaps are and how do we address it. So going directly with those specific service providers and looking at what can be done. And so it also requires a change in the way that we think and the way that we do things. So a lot of times when it comes to reporting, people don't feel comfortable in making reports. However, if the different service providers and different government entities are not aware of what is it that they're not getting, then how can change happen? Absolutely. And so I think that's one of the other messages that we need to look at. How do we also include the community members and advocates within the community to be involved? And that's why when I spoke at the beginning about different levels of implementation, not only at the national level, but subnational and community level as well. And so the various pillars, when we look at prevention, when we look at institutional strengthening, it also addresses those particular levels. It's not only the national level.
Let's just very quickly get into some of the policy and legislation review. What are some of the weaknesses that you're hoping under Spotlight Initiative will be addressed?
Well, one of the very first activities that we're working on is looking at the evaluation of the National Gender Policy and the National Gender-Based Violence Action Plan. Yeah. As you know, this plan has been in existence from 2010 and actually ends this year in 2020. And so looking at what has been done, because often there's a lot that is done, but it doesn't permeate into the knowledge of the public. Somehow, as much as we think that we are providing information to the public, they still have many persons that don't know that there are shelters available for them to use. They don't know that they can access the course for protection orders. And so it's important for those particular policies to address some of that. In addition, some of the things that we'll be looking at is an evaluation really of what then within that particular area of legislation framework needs to be evaluated. We've had the domestic violence since 2008, 2009. And so a lot of times, there are people who still are not aware of what are the rights that protect them under that particular legislation. And so what this particular pillar does is really looking at is our legislation in line with various human rights standards? And so how can the legislation actually be implemented, because we have a lot of very good laws, a lot of laws that a lot of times they're not as enforced as we would like to. And so hopefully through this evaluation of the gender-based violence action plan and the gender policy, some of that information will come about and be able to provide us with information that then we can recommend to government as a policy advisory body.
All right, so the Spotlight Initiative will officially be launched, and some of these activities, they've already started, or they're going to get started after that?
Well, we've already started. Actually, the launch was supposed to happen way back in February, March, but with COVID, everything got postponed. And so for us, it is really important for government to work very closely with our partners. But at the end of the day, be able to understand that, those bodies that are responsible to provide protection, empowerment for those families need to be part of the discussion. And I think using the National Gender-Based Violence Action Committee and the district committees as well, it really provides a very good platform to be very inclusive. And because the CSOs and NGOs also form part of that national and local body. And so it's important for us to be able to keep that focus of that multi-sectoral perspective of how to find ways that we each can bring our different strengths and our different, of what we find within each of these ministries for the betterment and protection of our people, especially all those families. Because at the end of the day, the family unit is the basis of our society. And because the family is not doing well, we are finding ourselves in this situation. We see it the way, even now in terms of COVID and the way people react and relate and behave. We know that it's at the end of how do we raise the families, how our families are doing, that impacts every single sector of society.
And that is a noble collective call for all of us working on building stronger families in our country. So the initiative is going to be launched, and how do people find out more about Spotlight Initiative?
There is a page on the internet. Currently, the project steering committee, if you can call it that, one of the things that happens is that because even though it's a government-led body, there is a national steering committee that also includes the various entities. And so most likely each of these ministries will have some information on it, and as well as a NGO committee that brings different NGOs to look at how do we are also implementing, how are we doing as a country. We will have additional information on our page as well, our website, the National Women's Commission, as well as our Facebook page. Our Ministry of Human Development will also be including additional information. But when we comes to the launch, it will be an online launch in terms of the current situation that we're living right now. And so we're looking forward to really having people take also a proactive step for those who are able to. We know that not everybody is in the position to be able to proactively take part, but to be able to participate, to also share the information. There is no perfect system, there's no perfect project or initiative, but I think it's important that at least the efforts, and I've been working in this for the past 10 years, efforts is always the focus of those persons that require the support that, often we think that we have. And it's never going to be enough.
But we have to start.
Country, right? We have to start from somewhere, but it also takes the community. So in terms of people who can become advocates, we always welcome them, but you have to also become informed. So do your research. Online, there's quite a lot of information, and so it's at the tip of your fingertips.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. We appreciate it. Best of luck, and stay safe, of course.
You as well, and thank you very much.
And with that, we're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we know that some parents have been exploring the possibilities of homeschooling their children given the current context of COVID-19. We'll have some of the details as to what you need to do to be able to be eligible after the break.